So the first thing you're going to want is some wire. I used 14 gauge. It's ideal if you have pre-tinned wire. I didn't. That's fine. You just tin it before you go on to the next step. What we're going to do is we're going to wrap the wire around itself like this. It's just a little bit more decorative. It looks nice. We're going to make two of those, and we're going to form them into a little ring with a tail like this. The tail is what you're going to use to solder it to the piece. So if you don't have pre-tinned wire, this is the time when you are going to tin it. Tin it before you wrap it around itself. You're just going to tin it. It'll be nice and straight. Once it's cooled, you can take it and wrap it around itself. I find it handy to, in the middle, you wrap it around something small like a pencil, or even smaller is ideal. I have just like a long metal rod that I use. So you take that, you wrap the middle of the wire around it, and then you just can spin the wire around itself in order to make this nice spiral shape. So you should have two of these, and once you've done that, you can insert the tail of the wire through that little loop that you made in the center and make that shape that we talked about. The one on the right now is the shape that you want. You want it to have a circle and the tail coming through. Start by only forming the circle for one of the wires that you made. We'll start with the bottom one first. So for the bottom wire, we want the test tube to be able to sit on the circle but not go through it. So that's what's going to help keep it balanced on the piece when it's hanging upright. So you can stick the tail end through that little loop that we talked about and make that circle, but hold it up against the bottom of your test tube to make sure that it's a little bit smaller than the diameter of the test tube so that the test tube isn't going to pass through it. Once you're happy with the size, you can bend the wire to make sure that tail is really secure and that the circle isn't going to grow over time. If you really want to secure it, you can drop a little blob of solder there where that tail goes through the loop. That will make sure that it's not going to move. I didn't bother because once you get it on your piece, it's going to be pretty secure anyway, but it's an option. Once you have that bottom wire formed, you're going to want to lay your test tube on top of your piece and mark where you want the bottom of the test tube to sit. I more or less centered it. It doesn't have to be centered, but that's where I wanted it to be. I found it easiest to lay it there and then draw a mark on the glass with a Sharpie to show me where I'm going to want to solder that bottom loop on. The mark will wash off easily when you're done, so don't worry about that. And once you've done that, you are ready to solder on the bottom loop. This part is fairly self-explanatory. You will hold the loop so that the bottom of it is right where you marked the Sharpie marks in the last step. And once you do that, you can grab a little blob of solder. Oh, I should have mentioned, you should put flux on both where the piece where you're soldering this onto and also on that little tail end of the ring that you're soldering on. So flux those up, and then you can drop a little blob of solder on there, and once it's secure, you don't have to hold it anymore with the pliers, and you can just drop more solder on there until it's nice and secure. Don't worry about making sure that the loop is nice and circular and straight. You can always bend it back into place after it's secure and cooled off. All right, so now we're ready to make the last loop. You're going to want the test tube to be able to fit through this loop. So I found it easiest just to form it around the test tube and sort of approximate where the wire needs to bend in order for the test tube to still fit through but also not be too loose. So that's what I'm doing right here. I formed it around the test tube. Now I stick the tail through the little hole there, and I'm going to make it more circular, and then I will test the fit of this circle around the test tube. Yep, it fits. So now that we know it fits, we can bend that tail up so that it will be able to stick out from the piece and hold the test tube. And once that's ready, we are ready to put it around the test tube again so that we can mark the spot on the piece on the glass again with a Sharpie where we want this to sit. Because we want to make sure we don't solder it too high up, and then the test tube wouldn't be able to have the ring around it and also sit on the bottom ring. So there's, no rocket science for exactly where you put it as long as it's not too high up. So I held it there, and now I mark the Sharpie so I know where to solder this onto the piece. Once we've done that, it's time to pick it back up, to put some flux on it and on the piece, and to solder it to the piece. And that's about it.